All right, one drawback with ExpressLRS was just the hurdle to get it flashed to your transmitter and receiver. Well, that's just become a whole lot easier with the new ExpressLRS Configurator. In this video, we're going to show you how to download the configurator, how to flash your transmitter and receivers with it, and we're going to go through some of these settings that you see right here and what they mean and what they do. So one of the first things we need to do is download the configurator itself. I'll drop this link down in the video description below. So I'll go ahead and install it just on my profile. This is a fine location. And voila, we are off to the races. It's a pretty simple configurator, which is nice. One of the first things we need to do is select the release of ExpressLRS we want to use, and then our target selection down here. And this is all the different targets. So if you're ever wondering, like, what can you flash ExpressLRS to? There's different ways to flash it onto your equipment, and we'll talk about the bootloader approach. And I'll make a video in the card to the upper right, and that was the bootloader method that I showed. So you actually have to flash a bootloader on top of your equipment first, and you'll have to do that in the radio for the module itself. You can do that with some firmware in the radio. And then your receiver, you're going to have to go ahead and connect that to the S-Bus port. Again, I'll make links to those videos in the upper right now. Check that out. You'll have to do the bootloader component. But in those videos, at the part where we go to download a Visual Studio and copy the repo and all that jazz, you don't need to do that anymore. That was the really confusing part. Actually, flashing the bootloader is easy. There's just some files you need to download, and you just use your radio just direct to the module. And then again, from the receiver, you just use the S port and wire your receiver to the S port, just like you would update any firmware for an FrSky receiver. Now, once the bootloader is updated, you'll never have to do it that way again. Then you'll just be able to use this now for update. So go ahead and check out those videos for the bootloader part, but when it gets to actually flashing the firmware part, stop those and then come back to this. What I'm gonna do is show you how to get it for the R9 ACC ST unit, because I think that's really the best use for the ExpressLRS, at least something that's like, yeah, you definitely should upgrade your old R9 units for ExpressLRS. So we're going to go through that here today, and that's what this unit is. So that would be in this target drop down here. That is going to be FrSky TX, and it's going to be the R9M via stock bootloader. So the stock bootloader was the bootloader approach, so that's the one. What I want to do here is pick what region I'm in, so it's FCC. I need to input my binding phrase. So the binding phrase, there is no binding with ExpressLRS where you're pushing the buttons and all that jazz. The binding phrase is a phrase that when you're flashing to your transmitter and your receiver, it's the same binding phrase, and whatever has that binding phrase, they're going to communicate and talk to each other. So just pick something you're going to stick with, and whenever you flash it to a new receiver, it's just automatically bound with your module. Now, hitting down through some of the other settings here, this hybrid switch mode, by default, ExpressLRS in any of your switches, like your 3-position switches here, they'll actually turn those to be 2-position switches. So yeah, it's not that awesome. So what you can do is click on this hybrid switch to 8, and that will prioritize your switches in transmission. You can read a whole write-up here on about what that does when it's on versus off. But essentially, you will have 3-position switches then again, channels 1 through 8. So channels 1 through 4 are your gimbals, and then you have 4 extra channels for any of the switches, and they will be 3-position switches. In my testing, I didn't see any difference in packet problems between the two, so I would definitely just recommend the hybrid switch 8, so check that on. The next thing you can consider is checking on the R9M unlock higher power. This will allow you to go up to 1 watt of power on your R9 module, and you can read more about that. They do recommend a fan cover mod, so what that is a 3D print that's for this, and then you can put a small fan in the back here. I would assume you'd have to wire it in to the power on this, and that would have some fan cooling on here. It does seem that people have been reporting that at 1 watt, sometimes the module kind of will overheat, but honestly, FrSky lets these go up to 1 watt, so take it for what you will. I'm gonna have that checked for this. Now the next thing here is if you want peak performance and the best, frame rate consistency you can get, you want to check on this non-sync on ARM. You want to read a little bit more about this, but with ExpressLRS, anything with a quad in fairly short range, you probably want to check this on. So for proximity freestyle, things where you're less than a mile away, you can check this on and you should be fine. If you're doing long range trips, like with a wing or a quad, and you're sending it way out, you may not want to check this on. So what this does is kind of the sync pulse between the transmitter and receiver. It does chew up frames. What this will do is when you have this button checked, that means after you arm, it stops doing the sync pulses back and forth, which gives you the best frame rate, the most consistent frame rate, where ExpressLRS is just 5 milliseconds right across the board, no jitter at all. And if you uncheck this every 2 seconds, which is 2000 milliseconds, it will send a sync pulse. So again, if you're flying a wing at super long range, it probably doesn't matter about that little jump in frame rate. You're so far out, you're not doing like racing or anything like that. But if you're flying within fairly close proximity, mostly what I do, you can check this on. Again, you can read more about what's going on right here with that. They do need to know what aux channel you're arming with for that, so go ahead and check that on whatever aux you're using. So I use aux1 for arming, so I'm going to go check that on. This is for clock synchronization with OpenTX. Now I don't have OpenTX 2.4 on here, but I do have the ExpressLRS build of OpenTX. Essentially, this is Crossfire Shot when people talk about this. That's what Crossfire Shot is. It's enhanced communication between OpenTX on the radio and the module itself. It's actually the Betaflight devs that brought this up as an issue with TBS, and we also tries to raise the issue with FrSky. And to some extent, I think it's not the total reason, but they fixed it in FrSky, but they only did it with the access modules. And other vendors like TBS fixed it for everybody to take care of their existing customers, where FrSky just kind of left everybody in the cold with the ACCST. Well, now we're all flashing it to ExpressLRS. And if you want the latest and greatest before OpenTX 2.4 comes out, I would definitely recommend going to the ExpressLRS GitHub. I'll drop the link down below, and you can go to this OpenTX folder right here, download the bin to flash your radio up to OpenTX 2.3.10, and that is the ExpressLRS compilation of all the good stuff. So it supports Crossfire Shot, supports Ghost Protocol, and a bunch of other enhancements that are going to be in OpenTX 2.4, but this is almost like a kind of a pre-release of it. It's their own little release of it just to get that stuff in and use now, since OpenTX 2.4 is not out. These last couple of options, this is a more of an experimental thing to really to optimize the synchronization between the OpenTX firmware and the module itself. But again, it's experimental, so I'm just going to leave that off. There's a backpack thing you can get for the modules if you're in more development arena, and this enables Wi-Fi for the older ACCST modules. So you can, if you're going to do that, you can check out ExpressLRS on that and check that. If you don't want it to play the tones, you can go ahead and check this, and we'll just give a single beep instead of the do that the module sounds every time the radio starts. Or you can have it do your own little melody jingle using the same creator for putting in music they'd use with the BL Heli. So if you have a special tone or song or whatever you want it to play, you can go ahead and check this and upload that file. Again, you have to get it made, and there's a resource on how to do it and all that kind of good stuff. With all this in here, the next thing you want to do is just go ahead and hit build and let this run. This will go ahead and compile the firmware and create the file you need to then put on your radio and then flash it to the module. After that's done compiling, and do wait a little bit. It will take a little bit the first time, much longer than it showed here because I've compiled it a couple times already. Just wait for it, and at the bottom you will see the same green message saying successful if everything went well, and then this folder will open up to give you this firmware ELRS file. From here, we're going to mirror the screens, and then I can show you here. We're going to go ahead and hold the two trim switches in, turn the radio on, and then we're going to go ahead and plug this into mini USB. Once that's plugged in, you will have some directories open up on your computer. So then I want to look for the one that has the SD card content here. We're going to go into the firmware folder and then go ahead and drag this new file over. I already have one there, so I'm going to go ahead and overwrite the one that's there. At that point, go down to exit, hit enter.
Welcome to OpenTX. Engines disarmed. Acro mode. Logging on.
Now at this point, you're going to go ahead and hold down the menu button, then hit the page button one time, go down to firmware, then one click down, hit on the ExpressLRS, go ahead and hold that down long press, and then press it again, and then you'll see it go ahead and start to flash to the external module. In the back of the module, you'll see it goes red, And then of course the progress bar, you can just watch that go through. Once it's done, you'll hear those tones just like that, or the little song, or if you have those beeps set up in a different way, and then it should say okay right here, and then you are good to go. Just hit okay. Okay, now that that's flashed up, we can go ahead and close this. You should see successful down here. We're gonna go ahead and hit the back button, come back to the screen here. We're gonna go and now select our receiver. So I'm using the R9mm, or if you're using that or the R9 Mini, you'd select this one with the pass-through. In here we have a couple selections that are the same, so we want to keep all those the same. You do have an additional option here that if you need USB, so you're not going to be flashing it through the pass-through though. At that point, you're going to have to connect it direct to your radio to get it flashed up this way going forward. But you do have an S-Bus option for if you can't use a UART for TX and RX to connect to direct to the receiver like we showed in that previous video. So that is an option for the future if you do need that. There's an experimental fast sync option. The initial sync happens really quick, so I'm fine with it the way it is, but you can check that out if you wanted to play a little bit. Lock on first connects. This talks about cycling through the different channels, whatnot. If you don't want it to do that, you can check out this description here. To me, I would just leave that off, kind of reading through that, or lock on 50 Hertz mode if you don't want the option to adjust it via the Lewis script for some reason. You can just select this for 50 Hertz mode, but that would be obviously just doing really long range kind of stuff, so I'm going to leave that unchecked as well. Now in this one we have this quad and we have the receiver already wired into my flight controller. So what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and plug in the flight controller to the computer by USB. Make sure you have Betaflight off and you're not connecting to the flight controller with Betaflight, because it's going to use the pass-through of the flight controller. Since the receiver is wired into a UART with a TX and RX, it can actually pass through here, use the TX and RX, and actually flash the receiver, using the flight control board. So, and it is kind of handy for those flight controllers that don't power the receiver right away, so that you can plug in at the right time. If you do have any issues where your flight controller is powering the receiver, as soon as you plug into USB, get on the ExpressLRS Discord and see if those guys can help you out. For this one, I'm in good shape. My flight controller does not power my receiver, so I'll show you what we do in that scenario. I want to come back to here now, and in this option, we're going to do the build and flash. So we're going to go ahead and click that button. Now my receiver is not powered up. We're going to let this go ahead and cycle, and I have a battery here on hand. And what I'm going to do is once this gets to the part where it's trying to start to connect to the receiver, I'm going to go ahead and plug this battery in. So we'll just kind of wait down here and watch this. This is going through the building process, so we're not there yet. All right, so now we're getting to this spot here. You can see it's going to connect and try to do the pass-through. Yep, right here, Betaflight pass-through. It's connecting to the comm, and right at this spot, pass-through is done. Now it's trying to retries here. So you have up to 10 retries here. So in between there, I'm going to go ahead and plug in. You can see as soon as I plug in, it recognizes it, connects to the receiver, and starts to upload the firmware. So you're going to look for those percentages, obviously at the bottom where it says successful. That's what you want to see. And successful down here again. And you're in good shape. And with that, we're going to power cycle everything. And then connecting to Betaflight, you can see I have it plugged in, Betaflight turned on, battery plugged back in, so my receiver powers up. And now I got my radio here, and it's bound right off the bat because we used that same binding phrase when we flashed this and then the receiver as well. ExpressLRS is using LQ and RSSI, that is 11 and 12, and you can see that we have the 3-position switches
Turtle mode.
like we're normally used to
Logging off. Logging on.
with that hybrid 8 mode. Oh, and look at that, we actually have with that hybrid 8
Access.
all the channels. Boy, that is nice. They're killing it. So what we're getting here is 5 millisecond frame rate, which is better than Crossfire, and we're getting all the channels on our radio 3-position. Now what's a little different is this pot here only has 3 positions, so it's high, medium, or low. It's not gradual in between, same thing with this pot. But you can also see, we're getting all our channels. Finally, just doing some testing on frame rate consistency. Again, I'll make a link to a video in the upper right in regard to some of the testing I've done on different modules so far on frame rate consistency, and there's more to come on that. You can see up top here is what we had for the R9 ACC ST version. It has this unfortunate heartbeat every 200 milliseconds. It jumps from 6.6 milliseconds up to like 14 milliseconds and then back down, which plays havoc with all kinds of stuff. I talk more about that, and you can see all the jitter just within that 6.67 milliseconds that you're seeing. See how wide and thick that line is compared to this one. Now, this heartbeat up here that it was having, that was with telemetry turned on or off. In contrast to that, down here we have ExpressLRS at 200 Hertz mode. So you can see that's this line here. You can see the jitter just down at 200 Hertz or 5 milliseconds is quite a bit less, and then there's not this heartbeat here. Now this is with telemetry turned off. Now, to be fair, this orange line down here, this is ExpressLRS with telemetry turned on, and you can see the packets are farther apart where it jumps up in the frame rate. And the key is that you can actually turn telemetry off. So if you were in a race, you just go into your Lua, turn telemetry off. You're probably not going to leave telemetry with 900 megahertz being so close. And you know, you have perfectly consistent frame rate, no jumps whatsoever. But if you did want to have telemetry, maybe you're going a little bit farther out, just go ahead and turn your telemetry on. This is at 1 to 125 and a ratio. And if you're interested in a little bit more on that, this week's Patreon only video is going to be talking about that in more detail. We're actually going to bring up some logs and show the impacts of one versus the other, since I have these both logged, of course, and see what this packet jump thing actually does to your set point and your feed forward and things of that nature, and just show the different settings in ExpressLRS with the different telemetry ratios and hybrid on versus hybrid off, things like that. So again, links to the video description for that down below. Otherwise, thanks everybody. I hope this helped. If you do have any questions or comments, drop them down below. And I will also put the ExpressLRS Discord, so if you have more detailed questions, hop on over to the Discord. The devs are super helpful and gets you through any difficulties you might have, or if you're experiencing any weirdness with the configurator, since it is fairly new, things like that.